In a reversal of his position at the weekend, Donald Trump now says the US has held talks with what he called the top reasonable person in Iran and claims that Tehran wants to make a deal, allowing him to pull back for 5 days from his threatened strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. But Iran says no such talks have taken place. 2 days ago, Mr. Trump said he would obliterate Iran's power plants unless it reopened the crucial shipping channel, the Strait of Hormuz, by midnight tonight. Well, after his comments, high oil prices fell and stock markets rebounded, prompting the leader of Iran's parliament to suggest fake news is being used to manipulate the oil markets. We'll be examining the economic impact of Mr. Trump's latest words, and we'll be asking our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, to shed light on those negotiations. But first, here's our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, with the story of the day.
The day began with the United States threatening more of this, only not on Iran's military targets, but its civilian power stations. They'd be obliterated, Donald Trump had said, unless the Strait of Hormuz was reopened tonight. But then suddenly, as he prepared to board Air Force One, an about turn. The president put off the attack for 5 days after what he called productive conversations with Iran.
They called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And we are very willing to make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. And it's got to be no more wars, no more nuclear weapons.
It also potentially might involve the US and Iran sharing control of the flow of oil.
Be jointly controlled.
By whom?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control
and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah.
But the threat of more military action remained.
We'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Mr. Trump said his envoys had spoken last night to a top Iranian official. He wouldn't say who, apart from denying it was the new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei. As markets opened in the US, traders seized on what they hoped was better news. The value of stocks rebounding, the price of oil falling, at least for a time. And all the while, the Strait of Hormuz remained too dangerous for most tankers to pass under the threat of Iranian attack. And Israel continued its bombardment of Tehran. The country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying President Trump had told him a deal was possible. So Donald Trump is now talking of deals and negotiations, a potential way out of the impasse he faces. But how real and developed these talks are remains unclear. James Landale, BBC News.
Well, let's go straight to Washington and to Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, yesterday Donald Trump was vowing no ceasefire. Today he's talking about the possibility of a complete and total end to hostilities. What has changed?
Things aren't going the way he hoped and expected. I think that's what is the realization here at the White House. He urged the people of Iran, if you remember, to rise up, but there hasn't been regime change. Iran continues to be able to retaliate, even though it's significantly damaged, and it's drawn those other Arab Gulf nations into this conflict, something that Donald Trump himself said would surprise him. And of course, then you get to the Strait of Hormuz, which has delivered this huge energy shock, price shock to the whole world, not least to American consumers with $1 on the gallon of petrol here. Reeta, many American presidents before Donald Trump have realised this, and perhaps he's realising this too. These wars are easy to start, but they can be very hard to finish.
Gary, thank you. Gary O'Donoghue in Washington, while Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, is here. And Jeremy, what on earth are we to make of these claims and counterclaims about US-Iran talks?
Yeah, two versions of the truth, perhaps. One coming from Tehran, one coming from Washington, D.C. Massive lack of trust as well. Don't forget, during previous rounds of negotiations, the Americans and the Israelis attacked Iran not once but twice, including on the 28th of February this year. Look, if there were talks, the agenda would have to be massive and complicated. What about the enriched uranium that could be used to make a nuclear weapon? What about the alliances Iran has around the region, like Hezbollah in Lebanon? And what about the Strait of Hormuz? the most potent weapon that Iran seems to have discovered, in fact, knew about all along. And plenty of people ask, why didn't President Trump know about it? The Iranians, if it is that kind of real negotiation at some point, will make their own demands. They'll want to retain control in some way of the Strait of Hormuz, maybe lift sanctions, maybe get some assurance that the Israelis are not going to attack them. So I think that what we're seeing right now is it perhaps Trump preparing a declaration of victory? Gulf states don't want to be left with a mess in the region. Or is it simply an attempt to reassure the markets? That seems to be one of the most credible things, to try to... He just grabbed at something to try to reassure them. The point is, though, to have victory in war, you need a defined objective, you need a clear exit strategy, you need a plan for what's coming next. And the evidence is that he had none of those things, whereas Iran has had this plan to make this into a war of attrition. And what President Trump has done has dismissed all those worries and doubts that previous American presidents have had about attacking Iran because of all the difficulties it would cause. And I think he's discovering that that's why they chose not to destroy the Islamic Republic, but try to contain it instead.
Jeremy, thank you very much. Jeremy Bowen there, our international editor. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has told MPs that Britain must be prepared for the war to continue for some time and that people shouldn't fall into the false comfort of thinking there would be a quick and early end to this. The Prime Minister also insisted the UK would not be dragged into the war. Downing Street said the Chancellor will tomorrow set out steps to crack down on companies seeking to raise prices and profit from the war. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
Week 4 of this war and the implications, consequences, questions tumble towards us, tumble towards the Prime Minister. Prices at the pumps now, the potential for costs to spiral in the future. The key question, how long is this all going to go on?
Do you think that households and businesses in our country should be planning for a disruption that actually lasts for months, or do you think that actually this can be concluded in days and weeks, as President Trump seems to suggest?
Hard to answer that question, if I'm honest about it, but we've got to plan on the basis that it could go on for some time.
And what about government help with bills, given how expensive universal support was after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine?
Are you considering targeted support this time rather than universal offer, given just how expensive it was last time?
I'm acutely aware of how much it cost last time round, and I'm acutely aware of the state of the public finances.
People want answers now, Prime Minister.
Yeah, we are looking at what support we can put in, and as soon as we're able to answer the question what exactly that looks like, we will make it clear.
The British warship HMS Dragon has now arrived in the Mediterranean, with critics saying it's embarrassing more kit wasn't sent to the region sooner.
Are you embarrassed?
We pre-deployed quite a lot of assets to the region, just to reassure you. Radar systems were pre-deployed, counter-drone systems were redeployed, F-35 jets were deployed in greater number than were already there.
This smacks of a lack of war-fighting mentality that reaches right across the government, which is what we address in this paper about war-fighting readiness, where we are not at. Smacks of an enormous complacency.
Well, this smacks of the fact that for years there was underinvestment by the last government and the stripping out and following out of our armed forces.
What more can the government do to support households, Mr Bailey?
Later, the Governor of the Bank of England joined senior ministers for a meeting of the government's Contingencies Committee, COBRA. The economic consequences for us all at the top of the agenda. There was plenty to discuss. Chris Mason, BBC News at Westminster.
Well, as you heard earlier, there were huge financial swings after Donald Trump's comments about talks, with markets reversing earlier moves. Faisal Islam is with me. Faisal, it is so volatile, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride on the markets. It started this morning with reactions to over the weekend, the concerns about escalation between the US and Iran. We saw it in government debt markets, we saw it in stock markets, we saw it in energy markets, probably best illustrated by that chart of the oil price, which I think we can bring up again, which has shown you. And it really just kind of collapsed off a cliff, and then it went down 14%, back up 10%, and it went up and down by more than 5% another 4 times during the course of today, which shows you as it's reacting to various things that are being said basically on social media and other things. And so how can anybody predict really where this is going? What you had in terms of the government's Cobra meeting today was an attempt to try and see what would happen, essentially, what would you need to prepare if this lasts for months rather than weeks. Coming out of that meeting, they've said, well, they're going to sort of hammer down on what they call profiteering and price gouging with a new framework from regulators. Not a huge amount of detail there. I think on the crucial issue of whether or not there'll be a similar support scheme, similar to what we saw in terms of energy bills 4 years ago, I think all the kind of everything's going leading towards the notion that this would be more of a targeted scheme if required. Still a few months off, bills will be cut before they might have to go up, and still who knows what's going to happen in terms of the underlying conflict.
Faisal, thank you very much. In Iran, after over 3 weeks of war, it remains very difficult to establish how many people have been killed. One US human rights group estimates that at least 1,400 civilians, including 200 children, have died. Iran itself hasn't been updating its official death toll figures, and the authorities there have threatened and arrested people who've illegally used the internet to send information abroad. Caroline Hawley reports.
A family mourns Parestesh Dahagin, killed doing the job she loved in a pharmacy. An airstrike took her life. Her brother said she'd refused to leave Tehran because wounded people and the elderly needed her help. She's one of 3 civilians we've established were killed in recent days. Ilma Bilki was just 3 years old. And Hamid Reza Jahanbakhsh was a Red Crescent worker on a rescue mission, but never returned. His Red Crescent colleagues continue to work around the country and around the clock. Here, rushing to save a woman trapped under the rubble of her home last week. She wants to know if her daughter is alive. The rescuer reassures her that they've already got her out, but her only child did not survive. Said to be the apple of her mother's eye, 26-year-old Berivan Molani was a fashion and lifestyle blogger killed by falling debris a day after returning to Tehran because she missed home. She died in her bed, according to a friend, in a missile attack aimed at Iran's intelligence minister. The Red Cross says the war has had alarming consequences for civilians. Early this month, the headquarters of Iran's Red Crescent had to be evacuated after an airstrike close by. And we've verified footage of several health facilities damaged. This was Tehran's private Gandhi hospital, which had an oncology department and an IVF clinic, hit on March the 1st. At the Khatam al-Anbiya hospital the same day, panic after a nearby explosion. And at the Persian Gulf Martyrs Hospital in the southern port of Bushehr on March the 3rd, newborn babies had to be evacuated. The World Health Organization told us it's verified attacks on at least 20 medical facilities and the deaths of 9 healthcare workers.
It's not for us to determine was a strike aimed directly at that facility or was that strike aimed at a facility next to it. It's an attack on health, and the onus is on the people who are pursuing a conflict to actively protect.
But large bombs dropped in built-up areas are killing ever-growing numbers of civilians, most of whose stories may never be told. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.